just again, so welcome again to the 2.0 version of the Rapid Qualitative Methods and Implementation Science Approaches and Applications. We have a wonderful panel together here today, joined by Dr. Alison Hamilton and Dr. Nicole Stadnick. And unfortunately, Dr. Boriska Rabin is not able to join us live today, but I just wanted to note that her perspectives and planning are very much woven throughout this work and the examples we share. So together, we'll walk through key principles of qualitative analysis, share applied examples, and discuss how these methods can be used with rigor, intentionality, and impact. Really looking forward to this conversation and to your questions throughout. Next slide, please. So just to get us sort of oriented to today's presentation, we have 4 learning objectives. Dr. Alison Hamilton will lead us off with an overview of rapid qualitative analysis, or RQA, and introduce us to the theories, models, and frameworks and how they can be utilized in rapid qualitative methods. I will then share a bit about assembling a rapid qualitative analysis team, especially thinking through meaningful involvement of community partners. And then Dr. Nicole Stadnick will discuss considerations for crafting and disseminating from our rapid qualitative work. We're planning for there to be time at the end for questions and discussions, open discussion after our formal presentation. And then there'll be a few minutes at the end where we share a QR code and links so that you can have today's presentation and a curated set of resources, as well as all of our contact information. So we look forward to your enjoyment here together. So for the next slide, we wanted to just sort of share this. If anyone's been in a seminar with Dr. Alison Hamilton, you'll see this sort of a poll question, really just wanting to level set who's in the room here or who's in our wonderful Zoom family here. And so if you could, I believe we have a poll in the chat where we are able to get you, yes. So it just should have popped up. Thank you. Really wonderful sets of responses. If we got about 56% participating already, 60%. This is so fun seeing this live. Up to 2/3 of you have shared. It's 70% of you. And I kind of think we're having a nice little across the board. About 1/3 of you are saying, I know what it is, but have never used it. And then the next is 22%. I use it all the time, frequently. So that's a nice balance there, and hopefully a lot of sharing of perspectives. 20%, essentially, 1 out of 5 of you saying, I don't know what it is. So that's good to know. So I think it's nice that we have this broad representation of familiarity and experiences. And so we will dig into a variety of examples to share. So, Alison?
Great, thank you so much. Let me just close out the poll. Okay, great. If we could go to the next slide, please. So our goal today is not to walk you through the whole approach. So sorry to the folks who said you don't know what it is, but there are other resources. The good news is there are other resources that do walk you through the whole approach. So what I'm going to do in the interest of time is review what this approach is about, and then send you to other resources for a more thorough walkthrough. You're going to see a couple different examples and considerations in today's session, and then we'll have other places where you can go for more information. So with rapid qualitative research in general, this tends to be a more telescoped and action-oriented approach, and it's used across many, many different fields. Many of us do implementation research, but of course there are other circumstances in which we want to turn results around quickly. And much of the earlier work and foundational work in rapid qualitative methods occurred in work related to like public health emergencies and things like that, where it was necessary to go to a place where something had happened, quickly gather information, or perhaps a policy was implemented and some really quick turnaround information was needed. So there are many, many pragmatic reasons why we might use more rapid methods. We'll focus today on the use of these methods in implementation research, but just want to make sure to say that there are many, many different options for this type of work. It is typically going to be a lot more efficient to do rapid qualitative work with teams, simply because having more people helps to make the work more efficient. And often when we're doing this type of work, we're drawing data from multiple different sources. Perhaps it's in the context of a mixed methods study. We might be drawing data in a number of different ways to try to answer our key telescoped research questions quickly. There are always trade-offs. One of the things that you might notice, especially if you were trained in more traditional qualitative methods, I'm an anthropologist, that's my background, is that we don't necessarily take as much time to critique, to reflect, to synthesize as we would if we were not on such a rapid turnaround timeline. That doesn't mean that those really important features of our methods would never happen. It's just that they may not happen with quite as much time and attention and focus in the rapid turnaround timeline that you have, but you can always engage in that work at other points during your project. Next slide. So one of the most important things to recognize about the rapid qualitative analysis approach that we'll be sharing with you today is that it is pretty specific to certain types of qualitative data. So if we think about qualitative data on a spectrum like we see here, all the way from unstructured qualitative data to structured qualitative data, rapid analysis, as we're going to be sharing with you, is not a great fit for that left side of the spectrum. It's not a great fit for unstructured data because you're working with elements of structure to help process through the data that you have. And so we want that data to be at least semi-structured in nature, so then a more structured analytic approach kind of maps onto the data that you have in a much more organic and comfortable way. When you have data that's highly unstructured, to try to fit structure into it could be not very comfortable and just not a great fit. Unfortunately, we have lots of analytic tools, and so we want to think about what analytic tools are a good fit for the types of data that we have. More often than not, the types of data that we have, as you'll see in examples today, in implementation research really falls into that semi-structured part of the spectrum, possibly even including some structured elements of qualitative data collection. And as you might imagine, if we were to draw this line out even further to the right, we would be getting into quantitative data collection. So all of our methods really existing on this spectrum, and thinking about how our analytic options are really shaped by the methods that we're choosing for a given research question. Next slide. So basics of rapid qualitative analysis, or RQA as we'll refer to it today, that it is really suited for semi-structured data collection. That might be individual interviews, dyadic interviews, focus group interviews. It could even be more semi-structured observational data collection. But the key is that there is a clear topic or domain of inquiry for each interview question. The interview guide, let's say you have an interview guide. If you're doing implementation research, most likely that's going to be mapped to some type of theory, model, or framework, and we're going to show you an example of that. That's not always the case in every type of research, but whether or not you have a theory, model, or framework as part of your data collection approach, we want to be sure when we're thinking about using rapid qualitative analysis that we have topics of each of those different components of our data collection approach. And we also want to ensure that the approach to data collection itself is consistent and rigorous, such that we are doing our best to obtain answers to the questions that we have laid out in that interview guide, or that we're collecting the data that's been laid out in maybe a templated form of observational data collection. Next slide. So this is the overview of the approach. The step-by-step guidance is available in a workshop, and you see the link here on the slide to a workshop where all of this is gone into in much more detail with an example. But basically what this approach involves is summarizing each data collection episode. So what I mean by that is, let's say an interview, using a template. So that's where that structure comes in. And we're creating these summaries to be able to have an overview of what was learned in that individual data collection episode. So we're looking within. And then we often pair our work with the summaries with matrix analysis, where we then take all of the summaries that we've created and copy them into a table. Table, matrix, interchangeable in this territory. And what the matrices allow us to do is look across multiple data collection episodes. And we can use both our summaries and our matrices to do a lot of work, to identify key points, to explore potential themes, to look at the consistency of data collection, to figure out what we might want to do next in a project. There's many, many, many options that you have once you've created summaries and matrices. And for some projects, you may only do summaries. For some, you may only do matrices. So there's a lot of flexibility built in here as well. And just because you might use Rapid at a certain point in your project doesn't mean that you can't go on to use other analytic tools and techniques during other parts of the project. Next slide. So basically what we want to do with our summaries is get at this question of what is in the data, to create sort of an inventory of the data contents by condensing the data that you have. That might be a transcript, it might be a set of really strong notes. We want to condense that into this sort of table of contents idea to give us a sketch of the data collection episode. So if you could imagine, you have a 50-page transcript, and then you have a 2 to 3 page summary of that 50-page transcript. So they go hand in hand really nicely. And what we want to do with our summaries is enhance our accessibility to what's in the data. So we can use line numbers from transcripts, if we have transcripts, to create that table of contents. And also we can write notes in a separate space where content is particularly strong or interesting or relevant to our research questions. Next slide. So that was a very quick overview of what this involves. Good news is that my team and I developed a framework for assessing and achieving rigor with rapid qualitative analysis, led by my colleague Christine Kowalski. And this paper, which is fairly recent, lays out 5 phases in rapid qualitative analysis with 18 recommendations. So what you see here are those 5 phases, and we get into detail about achieving rigor in design, data collection, developing those summary templates, using matrix analysis, and working through synthesis. So we hope that that will be a very helpful resource for all of you. It comes from many years of work across a team that has been doing this for a long time, and so we really are happy to have been able to put forth this consensus-based framework on rigor in rapid qualitative analysis. Next slide. So I just want to talk super briefly about integrating theories, models, and frameworks into rapid qualitative methods work. This is Dr. Rabin's portion of the talk, so I will try to do her justice. Never can fully be Boriska, because she is definitely one of a kind, very special colleague and scientist. But we will do our best. This is a question that often comes up with rapid analysis in implementation science, which is how do we incorporate our theories, models, and frameworks into the rapid analysis approach. So that's what I'm going to show you really briefly here. But before we do that, just a little bit of level setting about theories, models, and frameworks. Next slide. Which is can be one of the more sort of bewildering aspects of implementation science for those who might be newer to it. So when we think about TMFs or theories, models, and frameworks, one of the challenges is that we have so many, there are hundreds, and the terminology varies. So one might be called a framework, one might be called a theory, one might be called a model, etc. So don't worry about that too much because there's a lot of blending of especially models and frameworks. But the reason why we care about theories, models, and frameworks in this field is that we are trying to change something. And so theories really help us think about how that change might occur. And models and frameworks help us to think about how do we study what is occurring. So they could be action planning models. They can be frameworks that help us think through all the different factors that might influence implementation. Sometimes we need a combination of a theory and a framework. Some frameworks contain theories. There's tons and tons of resources available on this as well. Probably one of the best resources we have that we're so fortunate to have, next slide, is an online tool developed by Dr. Rabin and colleagues that I cannot recommend highly enough. This is an interactive web tool that helps you with D&I models, theories, and frameworks in a super interactive way. I use it all the time. I recommend it to people all the time because basically all that confusing stuff about what do I pick and how do I pick it, how do I decide what to use, this tool is going to help you with that because you can literally plug in all the different things you're thinking about and it will generate a list for you of what the best fitting theories, models, and frameworks would be for you to explore and why. So if you're even curious in the slightest, I highly recommend going to this website, playing around with it, looking at what it tells you in terms of the interest that you have in your implementation studies. So it's a tremendous resource that I think once you use it, you'll find that you're using it all the time. Next slide. This just shows you a little bit about the tool. You can see that you've got lots of different options. Maybe you're in a planning stage. Maybe you're thinking about combining a theory, model, and or framework. And all of that guidance is really built in to this web tool, depending on the stage you're at in the development of your work. Next slide. So our theories, models, and frameworks can do many, many things in qualitative research, especially in qualitative implementation-related research. They really help us to get organized. They can help us with the scope of our work. They can create connections between our aims and our research questions and our design and our data collection instruments because they help us to think about what we want to measure, what we want to assess, and how to go about doing that based on the work that had gone in originally to designing any given theory, model, or framework. They can also help us with data analysis, which is what I'm going to show you next. And they can help us with presenting our findings, interpreting our findings, and not the most important thing, but it is important to acknowledge that successful implementation science proposals are going to have theories, models, and or frameworks built in. It's definitely an expectation of this type of work. And again, that's because we want to have tools, theories, models, and frameworks are tools for us to think about what we want to happen in implementation and what actually does happen in implementation and beyond. Next slide, please. Our theories, models, and frameworks can also, really, I think many of these I covered, but they can really help us with creating a whole plan for our work, including the qualitative work, but also in the context of mixed methods work. Next slide, please. So this is an example from a study that Dr. Rabin and Dr. Pittman, James Pittman, conducted related to e-screening for suicide prevention. All of the details of the study are available in the study protocol. And what we wanted to draw attention to here very briefly was the application of a framework for the rapid qualitative work. Next slide. So this is, for those who might not recognize this, this is the PRISM, which contains REAIM. Many of you have probably heard of REAIM, Reach, Effectiveness, Adoption, Implementation, Maintenance, which has been around a long time, since the late 90s, thanks to Russ Glasgow and colleagues. And this is a more recent version of REAIM that it's built in the bottom section there to the PRISM, which is basically a comprehensive way of thinking about all the different features that are involved in implementation. So thinking about who's receiving the intervention, who's responsible for delivering the intervention, thinking about context, and all the different layers and levels that are involved in implementation. And what you see here, in the case of the e-screening project, is how the different aims mapped to different components of this comprehensive model. In this case, this is called a model. There are others that we use in this field that might be called frameworks, but what this allows us to do is think about all these different dimensions of implementation and how we're going to go about assessing them, measuring them, inquiring about them using qualitative methods. Next slide. So I won't get into the aims in detail here. They'll be available in the slide, but in the slide deck. But just wanted to draw your attention to the ways in which PRISM is integrated into the aims. So you see here that the evaluation is guided by REAIM outcomes. The aim 2 evaluation of feasibility, acceptability, and impact is guided by those REAIM outcomes, and then the contextual constructs from PRISM are built into aim 3 using qualitative methods. So, and this is straight from the protocol, and this is often what we do when we're proposing implementation research, is to really think about how we're integrating and weaving in our model to the way that we even frame the work. Next slide. So what you'll see in the next few slides are examples of how the PRISM domains related to the questions that were asked in qualitative interviews. So you see pre-implementation questions, what will work well when we're implementing e-screening, what may not work well. You see the domains of PRISM that are related to that question. And then the post-implementation questions, again, the PRISM domain, any things that came up in terms of sustainment and how that relates to PRISM as well. And this really shows the evolution of the interview guide across the time points when it's being used. This is often an approach that we use in designing our qualitative data collection instruments in terms of mapping the components of the model or framework to the question. So it's basically thinking about, how am I operationalizing this construct in the form of a question that I'm actually going to ask someone. You'll see if you get used to this type of work, that the terminology that we use in frameworks isn't always the most user-friendly. So we want to kind of translate the idea of the construct into a question that someone will readily be able to answer. But we want to keep track of how it lines up with the model that we're using. Next slide. And these are just additional examples from the guide. I think there's maybe 3 or 4 slides of this alignment process of looking at the questions, the domains they relate to, and how the questions evolve over the 3 time points of qualitative data collection, from pre to post to sustainment. Next slide, and I think we can just maybe roll through those in the interest of time Great. Thank you. And then here, if we could just pause here for a moment, what we can see is kind of shifting toward working on the application of the constructs from the model to definitions, some coding rubrics, definitions of those particular constructs, and the questions that they are aligned with in that far right column. So it's a good amount to take in. And I think the point here is not so much for you to, read every single piece of this, but rather get that sense of how we might organize our work with using the application of constructs from different models or frameworks. Next slide. And this is a little bit more of that here. Very comprehensive examples for you to take in, on your own time. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, we're going to shift over to Rabin to talk about assembling a rapid qualitative methods team. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alison. Okay, yeah. So next few minutes, yes, I love the hand claps. Thanks, Alison. So in the next few minutes, we're going to focus on the very real sort of practical question. Of course, all of this is practical, but if rapid qualitative analysis is team-based and action-oriented, what would the strong team actually look like? I'll highlight some core functions a rapid qualitative team needs, what must be in place before and during data collection, how rigor is maintained and under compressed timelines, and how community partners strengthen the scientific and implementation value of the work. Next slide. Okay. So rapid qualitative analysis is not simply traditional qualitative work done faster by one person. It's a coordinated analytic strategy designed to produce useful findings on a timeline that matches real-world decision-making. The key point here is that that speed comes from structure, and really we're not necessarily, and that it comes from the role clarity, templated workflows, early summarization, and ongoing communication. That means the team composition is not just sort of a staffing issue, it's a methodological choice that directly affects rigor, credibility, and usefulness. The goal of the rapid qualitative work is to move essentially from efficiently from data to synthesis to action, often while implementation is ongoing. So that means the way the team is assembled directly shapes what kinds of questions can be answered, how credible the findings are, and how quickly those findings can inform decisions. Next slide. All right, so this slide is really about intentional team design. So we don't need a large team, but you do need a team. In that team, you need to make sure each critical function is covered, even if one person wears multiple hats and often does. So the rapid qualitative method lead is the person driving the workflow decisions. They sort of lead with the matrix templates, the analytic approach, and the pacing of the work. Have a second analyst or verifiers, essentially for verifying credibility. This is your sort of built-in quality check, someone who can push back sort of on interpretations before they come hard and fast. So framework expertise becomes especially important when the team is working deductively, such applying a CFR or REAIM. So we need to have someone on the team that is well versed and experienced in the framework deeply, so that the coding is aligned and aligned with the components that it's designed to capture. And of course, the content of clinical expertise is what keeps the findings grounded. For example, in one of our studies, a clinician on the team flagged what looked like an implementation barrier in the data was actually sort of this standard clinical workflow, but the insight enabled us to address that in a meaningful way. Communication and calibration leads are critical in this rapid work so that the data collection analysis happens in parallel and keeping it all on and aligned and emerging patterns and decision roles. And then our community partners. This is the point where I really want to land and emphasize our community partners should be involved as co-interpreters, not consultants at the margins, but really helping ground this throughout. Their lived experience surfaces assumptions that researchers simply, sometimes cannot see or are not part of that. And so when we position partners as sort of co-leaders, co-interpreters, we get more valid, more contextually grounded, and ultimately more actionable findings. So the central principle here is balance, methodological expertise plus contextual expertise. Neither one alone is sufficient for rigorous, rapid, qualitative work. So now let's sort of move on to the next and talk a bit more about this. All right. So what do teams need before and during data collection? And it's a balance here. We don't wait, rapid qualitative teams do not wait until data collection ends to begin analysis. Analysis starts immediately and runs in parallel with the data collection. So that means the teams must build the interview guide, summary template, and matrix structure before the first interview. And then during data collection, each interview should be summarized promptly using the agreed upon template. And the team should meet regularly to debrief, calibrate, and really prevent any drift. So traceability in there matters as well. So having teams having a way to connect summaries back to the raw data, which is Alison noted there, whether it's audio, notes, lines, transcript markers, all critical. So planning, bottom line, is central to rigor and reproducibility. Next slide. And I think we've kind of hit this point home here, but well-structured templates and calibration can support contribution from team members with varying levels of qualitative experience, provided there's strong qualitative oversight. So rigor is maintained through repeated calibration, piloting early interviews, comparing summaries, align what we see and what belongs in each domain, and decide how that interpretation is appropriate, and document along the way any changes to the template or analytic rules. This is where we can see, trainees, people from various backgrounds can contribute really meaningfully. And rigor comes from that shared structure and not just individual expertise alone. So auditing and documentation are critical here. They protect against, as I said, analytical drift and ensure transparency, which matters for both peer review and stakeholder trust. So without calibration, I would say teams risk missed or oversimplified findings. Okay, next slide. Community partner involvement, again, strengthens the science and the implementation value of the work. Hard stop. Partners have a role in all aspects. They partner in creating the interview guide, helping to refine the guide so that the language and the topics fit the setting. They help check the interpretation during synthesis so that the team does not drift from sort of what is happening in practice. They also help shape final products so that the outputs are useful to the intended audience, whether it's a clinic team, program leaders, or community organization. Their practical requirement is role clarity. Partners need to know where they advise and where they decide and how their input will be used on a rapid timeline. Bottom line, community partners partnering in the fullest sense strengthens validity, relevance, and actionability. So, next slide, please. So key takeaways here. The most effective rapid qualitative teams are not necessarily large, but they're intentionally composed. And they combine methodological oversight, verification, framework fluency, content knowledge, and strong communication. They also truly engage community partners, their experiences, insights, and expertise in meaningful ways from the beginning. When those functions are in place, the rapid qualitative analysis produces rigorous actionable findings on a timeline that supports implementation decisions. So thank you. I'll hand it over to Nicole.
Great. Thanks so much, Robin. So hopefully you have a better sense of why and how you might perform rapid qual analysis. Now I get to take you through what you might do with your rapid qualitative work. Let's go to the next slide, please. So here are a couple of examples of products from your rapid analysis. I'll highlight just a couple of them because I do want to leave us a healthy amount of time for questions that I see in the chat. So one product and useful product from rapid analysis is to have a really quick, accessible snapshot of what's in your qualitative data, which can really anchor some of these other products that we'll talk about. In implementation research, this can really be helpful, especially if you are performing qualitative work with a number of different types of individuals. These, might include clinicians or providers, parents or patients, leaders of organizations. So this can give you a sense of what types of, topics and content are being shared across your different partners in your research. You also might use rapid analysis to develop a coding approach if you intend to use a more in-depth qualitative analytic approach at a later point in your project. And then another example, which might be super of interest to this audience here, is preparing reports, presentations, and manuscripts. And in just a moment, I'll show you an example of a manuscript that used rapid qual analysis in a mixed method study. All right, let's go to this next slide. Great. So this is a really helpful visual developed by Alison, Jamafix, and Erin Finley, three incredibly talented medical anthropologists and just darn nice individuals. They developed this wonderful pragmatic healthcare ethnography handbook that I highly recommend. And in this, they have a visual about how your rapid qual analysis can support all the way from getting familiar with your qualitative data through the phase of analysis and interpretation of your findings. And kind of the phases in between as well. So let's go to the next slide here and I'll give an example from a paper. So this is an example from an implementation study that I led a couple of years ago. We were focused on developing an integrated care model for autistic children with co-occurring mental health needs. And in this study, we wanted to understand the impact of our integrated care model from the perspectives of pediatricians and caregivers. So we had both qualitative and quantitative data from both of those perspectives. In the paper here, I included this just in case it's a helpful example as you're writing up your qualitative assessment methods. We explained that we used a templated matrix that included summaries of each of the questions that we asked in our interview guide. And then we developed themes from our templated summaries with our analysis team. Harkening back to an example we shared earlier, this study was guided by another implementation science framework, the Exploration, Preparation, Implementation, and Sustainment Framework, EPIS, which I'm selling it a little bit short, but one of the unique features of EPIS is that it does help you think through different phases of implementation. So we anchored our questions in our interviews to some of the most relevant implementation phases of that framework. We, at the same time, collected quantitative data about feasibility and overall experience with the integrated care model from our pediatricians and our caregivers. And so we integrated both our qualitative data and our survey data through a joint analysis, or sorry, a joint display that I'll show you on the next slide. And this was to understand if our qualitative and our quantitative methods were telling the same story about people's experiences with this integrated care model, and do our quant versus qual provide a unique insight into experiences with this care model. Let's go to the next slide. And so at the bottom here, this is an example of a joint display. So on the left-hand side, we've presented our quantitative data about implementation outcomes, including feasibility, acceptability, and intentions to sustain using the model. And then we contrasted those with our qualitative data organized by EPIS context determinants. So this is just a way to display how the implementation outcomes were enriched by our qualitative data collection and analysis. And I think with that, let's go to the next slide. I think I'll pass it back to Rabin to do a couple of wrap-up slides, and then we'll have a good amount of time for questions.
Thank you, Nicole. I was actually in the chat answering some questions, so thank you, and thank you both to Alison and Nicole. We'll really appreciate the thoughtful interest and energy around rapid qual methods and how they're being used and adapted. At this point, we'd love to open it up for questions, reflections, or examples from your own work, and use this as a sort of a quick opportunity to get consultation. Feel free to use the Q&A and the chat, and feel free to also just unmute, raise your hand, and we can call on those. Let's see. On my screen, I first see Victor and Nicole and Alison. We could take it as a team, but Victor, yes.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Can I be heard?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much to the organizers. Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Rabin, for the wonderful presentation. My name is Victor, and I'm a research associate all the way from Nigeria. So I want to ask a quick question, because when I attend webinars like this, I like to apply them to the work that I do currently. So currently we are running a pilot study where we are testing for the feasibility and the acceptability of a telemental health service for people who are living with HIV and AIDS. So we are just trying to know whether telemental health, as against the traditional face-to-face therapy session, actually helps to reduce depression and to reduce anxiety amongst people living with chronic diseases like HIV. So we test them at baseline before they get the intervention from a psychologist. Then after that, we also test to know their scores after the intervention, and we compare the two. So I want to ask a quick question, and it has to do with contests. I want to ask, for my telemental health study, I'm trying to apply the rapid qualitative analysis to our telemental health program in Nigeria. So my question is, what domains should we prioritize in the rapid qualitative analysis metrics that we capture both the patient and the provider perspective on feasibility? This question has a way of moving us to the context, the Nigerian context. I want to adapt it contextually to my Nigerian situation. So what domains should we prioritize, when we are dealing with patient and provider perspective on the feasibility of the telemental health project?
It's a great set of questions, Victor. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us. I would say that, I tend to be very pragmatic with questions like this in terms of figuring out which domains to prioritize. I think it depends on what your immediate next steps are. So if your immediate next step is to adapt an intervention that exists, but that you're maybe shifting to another context, then you may want to focus on the data from your qualitative data collection that really speaks to the adaptations that need to be made. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't pay attention to other aspects of what's discussed in the qualitative data collection, but for focused rapid analysis, you might focus in on aspects that you want to move forward quickly with, such as adaptation, different pieces of the intervention that need to be adjusted or refined or adapted. So it for me, it always comes back to the research question and the time frame, and what are you trying to do when. And it may be that you need to work with different portions of your qualitative data at different times, depending on what you're trying to achieve within a given time frame. So if sometimes what happens in contrast is we say, well, I want to take a look at everything we have in the qualitative data and then make some decisions. But that's sometimes a good fit for the questions that you have, and sometimes we need to be much more focused in on the next step that you want to take. Or like, for example, in implementation research, if we're trying to figure out what strategy to use, we might really focus in on data that helps us with that question, so we know what to do next week or next month or whenever we're interacting with a site again. So for the moment, for the purpose of that question, I might not pay attention to other things that I can learn from the qualitative data and just focus in on what do I need to know to move forward at such and such site. I don't know if that helps or points you in the right direction.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Alison.
Great. Thank you so much. I think that Sean had a question. I know Sean, so I saw his name and I thought, yay, Sean. Sean, are you still with us?
Yes, I am still here. I was putting my question in the chat just in case we couldn't get to it. I appreciated the dedicated segment on engaging like community partners or operational partners into the RQA process. I actually just was on a presentation with Nick Rattray last Friday on Engage Science with some of our fellows on prioritizing engaging like veterans into some of our research. But I had a question on that because we're trying to do rapid qualitative analysis, but that some of the partners that we engage with aren't always don't have necessarily the access or the permission, say IRB for like a study or just operating within QI within like a VA setting. And so I just wanted to ask like maybe special considerations that have been taken to engage community partners in a rapid qualitative analysis process, thinking about things about de-identifying, doing a lot, have to de-identify, clean, and prepare the data ahead of time to be able to let community partners be able to help in that analysis process, but while also trying to keep keep the process rapid while you're going through that data. And so I was just wondering if that could be discussed a little bit more.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Oh.
No, go ahead, Robin, please. I was going to say sounds like a Robin and Nicole question.
I am happy to share a little bit, and then love for Nicole to share as well. But just in overall, I would say there are many ways to invite feedback and participation to where not necessarily the content of the information is being shared. So levels, think about it from the beginning, how they can be engaged and if they can be part of the team and can be on the IRB. So you have that, hopefully at least one person throughout that is sharing in that way and contributing thoughtfully and being compensated for their time. And then having those that sort of you can have a not as specific engagement in sharing the information and just regularly, I would say, is also engaging with whether it's an organization, an agency, a group where we're finding these things. Can we engage with you and share and get your ongoing feedback so that it's not at the end and you're presenting the results to a broader group. But so having those, if you can have at least one person that can engage in that way, and then maybe a broader group that has a more general sort of set of information shared back, but also informative along the way.
And just to expand on a couple of those points, Robin, about levels of engaging partners. If you can have a community partner, go through some of the human subjects of protection training, awesome. There are some newer resources, for example, from Camille Nebaker, where they've developed more kind of community partner friendly ethics training courses that might be of interest. And so if you can, have them be part of your IRB protocols where they can have access to kind of the raw qualitative data, that's an amazing option. If that's not an option, in some of our work, we have worked with our community advisory boards and produced reports and asked them to help us with data interpretation. So it's de-identified, and we're providing, summaries from our qualitative data. And that's a way to engage them in kind of the sense-making process. So some just different examples of how you might be able to engage partners based on their access and expertise.
And it really can be with that example that Nicole is sharing now, this iterative bidirectional driving the science as well. So inviting, sharing with the community advisory board, them providing their expertise and recommendations, and then scientists also, not just those who are engaging in it at that point, but sharing back with the broader community of scientists so that they can then also embed that, and it really have this synergistic opportunity for driving the science. I love that.
Thank you. I appreciate those examples.
Yeah. I think if we can, yes, shift just, and if there are other questions that are in the chat, we will look and see who it is and reach out to you with some responses. What we have up right now is just wanted to note a logistical item that you can scan that QR code, and that will be where we host our recording for today's presentation, as well as the slides will be there. And it will be posted on our UAB YouTube, as well as being able to hopefully be shared with our colleagues at UCLA and UCSD. And you'll see the link there too, where if you have the PowerPoint slides, you'll be able to just click on the link. But we encourage you to share the recording and resources with colleagues and trainees and community partners, who aren't able to join us today. Let's see. Going to the upcoming seminars and offerings. Just wanted to briefly note that as we are part of a broader set of ongoing seminars and offerings through our respective hubs, IS hubs and Cheshire. So let's see, the one that is on here now is for our UAB, and these are our upcoming ones after today. So each month we have one, and the upcoming ones really move from sort of this methods to action, including how to translate findings to implementation strategies, designs for effectiveness studies, and centering the community voices as true partners in implementation science. And then later in the year, we're going to dig into biostatistical considerations, implementation outcomes, dissemination science, and writing policy briefs, which are so fun, and op-eds. So at UAB, we also host monthly conversation hours, which are informal spaces to ask questions and connect across settings. So please look at the QR code here and on our website as well. So on our next slide, Alison, did you want to maybe say something about yours?
Yes, I would love to encourage folks to join this upcoming beachside chat and all the beachside chats. It's going to be a really special session with 3 amazing implementation scientists, including Nicole, talking about failures in care and missed opportunities in implementation. It's a very compelling session that I hope you'll join us for in a couple weeks, and we have more coming up as well. And all of our beachside chats are available on our YouTube playlist, which is on an upcoming slide. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alison. And Nicole, your presentation.
Yes, so here's our upcoming presentations. Tomorrow, actually, we have a seminar, and Allison will be part of that. We'll be hearing about VA query. It'll be about a VA query panel with some others from other regional VAs. And then I'll also plug in June, I'll be presenting with Katie Wilging, another wonderful medical anthropologist, about ethical considerations and mixed methods research. So that might be of interest. Thanks, Robin.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you all for spending your time with us today. We really appreciate your questions and thoughtful participation. If you have follow-up questions or want to contribute to the conversation, are interested in consultation, we do, all of us have consultations that we offer and are available on our websites that are listed here. So along with that, you'll find our listservs, newsletters, and YouTube channels where all of our recordings are. So we're grateful to be part of this community of hubs and broader Cheshire network. And so we look forward to staying connected. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.